Greetings from Nairobi, Kenya, to everyone joining us today for our last and final webinar series. It has been an exciting journey since the first session, and I'm very happy to just welcome you today to our over 100 participants out of the more than 300 registered participants. The webinar is hosted by the African Venture Philanthropy Alliance in close collaboration with Impact Frontiers, with able funding from the foreign FCDO. And I would want to just take this opportunity to just take you through what will be happening during our webinar series today. And the webinar series is capped on the perspective on impact storytelling. So we'll be having opening remarks from Matt Ripley, the Director Impact Frontiers. Then we move on to a presentation around storytelling from Yawande. And then we have impact reporting from Tara, all the way. Really, thank you, Tara, joining from Global Partnerships. Evelyn, sharing the successful story from One Acre Fund on what the difference they have been able to make through for farmers across Africa. And then we come back for Yawande for the question and answer session. As we begin off today, I just want to draw you to some quick writing from one of the greatest historians of our time, Yuval Noah Harari. In his book, Sapiens, he said that the greatest thing that human beings ever did was storytelling, be it around religion, be it around building a nation. Storytelling is the power of human relations. Or whether you come from the belief that human beings started to be being in 2.5 million years ago, or whether they came from being from 6,000 years ago from the story of creation, we are going to see how storytelling is also making a difference across the impact management and measurement. So remember to stay on to the very last session of the webinar, because we'll be telling you what will happen after we are through with this webinar series. Now, I want us to move to the next session, whereby I just want to take the opportunity to give Matt Ripley to be able to walk us through what has happened since the starting of these sessions and what will happen afterwards. And then from there, we'll be able to just really interact around this. Over to you, Matt, to be able to take up the next session.
Thank you so much. And it's really great to be back today for this fourth and final session of the webinar series. So for those who haven't joined previously, let me just give a little recap about what we've covered. So this series is built around the impact performance reporting norms, and I'll share a link to these in a second. But essentially, they are an open access resource that represents a broad and emerging consensus on what content to include in an impact report and how to present that information clearly and credibly. Now, while the reporting norms are primarily designed for impact funds reporting to their capital providers, they can be useful inspiration for any organization sharing its impact, from social enterprises to nonprofits and beyond. So in the first 3 sessions, as you see on screen, we covered some really interesting topics. In the first session, we dug into the question of how to actually present progress towards intended positive impacts in a way that avoids some common pitfalls of reporting. And we talked about some of the common pitfalls or challenges being things like floating metrics, which is where impacts data is shared without context, making it really hard for readers to interpret what is good or bad or on or off track impact performance. And we talked about a potential pitfall of flat metrics. So that's recognizing that the evidence base for social environmental impact claims can vary. And we know it's really difficult in some areas to collect good data. So in reporting, treating all numbers as equal, even when they differ quite significantly in terms of quality or relevance or strength of evidence, can actually, again, inhibit the usefulness of that information for readers. So that was the first session. In the second session, we had a really exciting conversation around what to do when things go wrong. So this is all about when things don't go to plan. And we covered why this is such a crucial area of reporting, because again, as we know, working towards and in the context that we do towards many very tricky social and or environmental goals can be really challenging. And so the journey towards the positive change we want to see can be full of many ups and downs. And here we talked about a few things. First, well, it's really difficult to know if you're off track if you don't know where you're going. So we talked about the importance of targets and thresholds for what counts as a positive change, because these are really crucial to be able to not just interpret impact performance, but figure out whether things are going well or they need course correcting. And we also acknowledged things do go wrong. That is the nature of the work we all do. And when things do go wrong, particularly when causing and unintentionally causing negative impacts, there was a couple of good practice points that we highlighted. One was transparency. So really trying to openly acknowledge and share those negative impacts, but importantly, explain how you're measuring them and what you're doing to address and mitigate those negative impacts. And really that was all, or could all be underpinned by not necessarily an accountability and compliance mindset, but actually a learning mindset. So shifting from thinking about transparency and telling people when things have gone wrong from being a bad thing to actually potentially being a good thing, because it provides an opportunity to improve and grow and learn. And then in last month's session, so the third session, we focused on how to integrate the views and experiences of people and communities into impact performance reporting. We covered lots of things in that session, but we did underline there the importance of qualitative information, so not just the numbers, but the narrative, and the power or the potential power of case studies to give voice to affected people and communities. And that is a really good bridge and build to the topic of today's webinar, which is, of course, all about impact storytelling. So for that, Sam, I will hand back to you, and I believe Yewande will then lead us through.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Matt, for that contribution. And once again, I want to take this opportunity and alert you that the previous recorded sessions would be available. And subsequently, as you have seen in the webinar chat, we have been reminded around some of the rules. So there is a question and answer icon, which you need to engage with in case of any questions to our panelists. Again, this session, like the previous sessions, will be recorded. We also welcome you to participate in polls. And finally, to also remember to tag us on our social media using the hashtag impact reporting. So to start us off, I want to just welcome you to be able to participate in this question. And it's around how valuable are case studies in bringing impact to life compared to numbers alone. So ideally, we are around the story of impact storytelling. So we want to hear from you around what are your thoughts from this question. And from there, as you submit in your vote, I'll be able to welcome Yawanda to just give an overview of the voting and then take it up from there. So most welcome, Yawanda, and over to you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Samuel. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this fourth and final session. If you've joined us for the previous 3 sessions, I hope this has been really valuable for you. And I just want to thank AVPA and Impact Frontiers for the opportunity to be part of this. So let's have a look at the poll results. How valuable are case studies in bringing impact to life compared to numbers alone? And clearly, they are extremely valuable, 62%. 34% say very valuable and 4% say somewhat valuable. Thankfully, nobody says they are not valuable. So that's a really great start to this session. Next slide, please. Are we going straight? Yep, wonderful. Okay. Are we going straight into another poll? Okay, good. Okay. What is the most common credibility risk when using case studies? Selecting only positive stories, so cherry picking the best ones, lack of transparency on how the case was chosen, or minimal inclusion of community or beneficiary voice. What do you think? I don't think this is a trick question. They could all apply, to be honest. What's the most common credibility risk? Okay, by far selecting only positive stories, yes, definitely a big issue. One that we're going to talk a lot about today. Okay, great. So let's move on. Great. So I want to kick off today's session by exploring how reporting on outcomes enables decisions through the capital value chain. Now, it typically starts off with affected people communicating the outcomes they experience to the enterprises that are producing their products and services. The enterprises, based on what they hear from affected people, will then assess their progress towards the impact goals which they've agreed, both with affected people and any lenders or investors. Asset managers will then, using the enterprise reports as a basis, compile their own impact reports, which also include the asset manager's contribution to the enterprise's impact. And then using all of that information, capital providers will communicate to their beneficiaries and customers the impact that their capital is having. Now, capital allocators and providers, sorry, previous slide. Capital allocators and providers need information to be able to assess risk, return, and impact. And from an impact perspective, as we can see from this model here, there's a bit of distance between the capital providers and affected people. And so that typically means that their level of understanding of the outcomes that affected people are experiencing is not as robust as, say, enterprises or asset managers. The job then of enterprises and asset managers is to clearly communicate to capital providers the impact that affected people are having so that they can fuel and support their decision making. Now, reporting quantitative outcomes such as number of jobs created or women's access to financial products, is part of that work. But it doesn't present a compelling case to capital providers. And really, this is where case studies and storytelling comes in. So next slide, please. So case studies and stories help to create a fuller picture of the impact. And I've included these two pieces here to underscore that point. So the first is from a well-known website called Tech Cabal, and they said that African startups are misunderstood on the global stage due to poor storytelling on their transformative innovations and solutions. They tend to rely on their founders' personal journey to tell the story, which could lead to a one-dimensional narrative that fails to reflect on the company's broader mission, vision, or social impact. And then in a report by the GSG earlier this year, they stated that the need for local evidence-based case studies that demonstrate the possibility of both financial return and social and environmental impact is especially paramount. Now, in a context where we have a lot of SMEs and startups looking for local and global capital, and we have a lot of first-time fund managers trying to demonstrate traction, using case studies and stories could be a real strategic lever. Next slide, please. But the narratives should complement the numbers and not be a complete substitute. So there is a lot of benefit from quantitative data. It's easier to analyze and compare year on year, for example. It increases the ability to standardize results across the ecosystem, and it enables disaggregation of data, such as, for example, looking at what has happened to women, for example, compared to men. However, it does miss the local context and the human element of communication. And qualitative data is engaging. It brings the data to life, and it's one of the best vehicles for communicating the voice of affected people. And it tends to reveal more detail about why the change happened, as opposed to quantitative data, which tends to reveal what change took place. But as the audience have highlighted, cherry-picking positive stories is a major factor when using qualitative data such as case studies and stories. And this has the risk of really undermining the content of impact reports if not dealt with properly. Next slide, please. And this is really what the impact performance reporting norms is trying to address. So it's really trying to help report preparers to get the benefits really from communicating an in-depth case while mitigating the risks of potentially greenwashing or cherry picking. Now, the norms see a case study as something that provides an in-depth example of impact performance, and it details what a case study should include. So section 5.1 says you should include the case study type, of which there are 4. So there are 4 types of case studies. It includes in 5.2 that you should include the selection process and purpose of the case study. So that is basically saying, how did you select the case study and why? And it outlines 3 different ways for selecting a case study: convenience, probability, and purpose. So convenience basically means, let's say, for example, you have 10 companies in your portfolio, but you only have sufficient data for 1 company. And so you decide to report, you decide to create a case study on that company just because you have the available information. Probability is you randomly selected a company to present for a case study, or it just happened to be part of your scheduled cycle of case studies for the year. And purpose is you have a specific intention for communicating something with that case study. And that could be a success story, for example, of a successful investment, or it could be an unsuccessful investment, and you want to use this case study to communicate learnings for the wider ecosystem. Section 3 of the norms say that you should also include the investee overview and the impact thesis. So that's essentially talking about giving a brief introduction to what the investee does, and the impact strategy. And section 4 is talking then into the meat of the case study, the actual story that you're trying to communicate, which is the impact, performance, analysis, and commentary. So this is what happened in this case. So I just want to highlight here that section 5.1 and 5.2 are really the new bits of content that preparers should think about when it comes to case studies. And they're really pushing the preparers into disclosing and being transparent about why that particular case study is there, what it is, and what you intend to achieve with that case study. So next slide, please. So just going into the 4 types of case study in a little bit more detail. So the norms outline 4 types, namely illustrative, exploratory, critical instance, and cumulative. So an illustrative case study is your most common type of case study, and it essentially outlines detailed information about a portfolio company's achieved results. So that would go in depth into the activities and the outcomes of that portfolio company over the period in question. It might include some year-on-year quantitative data, and it might also include the contribution of the investor. So this is your standard case study that we're used to seeing. An exploratory case study communicates hypotheses for investigation or anticipated results. So this is really quite forward-looking. And for example, if you have a portfolio company that has maybe some groundbreaking innovation, and you want to communicate the potential, the future potential of that innovation, you would include an exploratory case study to communicate what this innovation is about and the potential for value creation. A critical instance case study examines a topic of special interest. So this might be, for example, if you're brave enough to include, and it's encouraged to include, an instance of negative impact which has taken place during the course of the investment, and you're outlining the learnings from that negative impact. Or it could include a specific commentary on the strategy, for example, of a portfolio company, or some change to the portfolio company's business model that requires a little bit more exploration. A cumulative case study synthesizes findings from many different case studies. So it might look like the cumulative presentation of a portfolio company's performance over a period of years. So these 4 types of case studies are vehicles that preparers can use to illustrate what they're trying to communicate through the case study. And it's up to the preparer to determine which one suits the situation. Next slide, please. So I just want to round up with a few tips on using case studies and stories and impact reports. The first is to ensure the case study is relevant and faithfully represented. So this really speaks to the principles and the norms of useful information. The second is to include the case study type, the selection, rationale, and process. So this is section 5.1 and 5.2 of the norms. And the third point is to really complement your narrative with numbers so that you present a more holistic picture of the case study. The fourth is to be balanced in your approach, share what's working and what isn't working. And the fifth one is really to back every case study and story with evidence to substantiate the information that you're providing. Next slide, please. So we know that being more transparent could be a difficult thing to do, and I would really love to hear from the audience. How do you think that case studies and stories could be more meaningful and more credibly presented? Do you have any suggestions? What are you currently doing to sort of balance those benefits and potential pitfalls of using case studies? If anybody has any thoughts, feel free to contribute. Any takers? Attaching it with feelings. Very interesting. Okay. Yes. Any other thoughts from anybody? No? If we're feeling shy at the moment, we can come to this conversation at the end of the presentations. Yes, absolutely. Involving stakeholders and the affected communities grounds it in real life. Absolutely. Real life brings authenticity. The more specific you are, digging deeper. Yeah. Set up the parameters for the case studies and storytelling, closely aligned. Absolutely. So your case study should definitely be aligned to your impact thesis to bring more credibility to it. Absolutely. Including systems and network mapping. Very, very interesting. I think there is a need for more context. Yep. Know your audience. Absolutely. Know your audience, who will read it and what benefit it is to them. Wonderful. I think there's someone's hand up. Would anybody like to share? If not, I'll hand it over to you, Sam, to introduce the next speakers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I've just taken note of Titsi and Joseph, and Mordecai will be able to give you an opportunity towards the tail end at Q&A, but I've picked up your names and Yolanda, just to take note, you would like to just contribute. Allow me to take this opportunity to introduce Tara Murphy, the Chief Capital and Impact Officer at Global Partnerships, to just take us through the story around global partnerships and how they are able to undertake impact storytelling. Most welcome, Tara, and over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Samuel. It's a pleasure to be here. Honor. Thank you for the invite. I'm going to start maybe by sharing a little bit about who Global Partnerships is, and then the example that I'm going to share with you all. Global Partnerships is a nonprofit impact-first fund manager dedicated to expanding opportunity for people living in poverty. We invest in social enterprises that are addressing the various needs of those living on dollars a day. And we're providing working capital alongside impact analytics and advisory support to help those social enterprises achieve and grow their impact. So the case study that I'm going to bring to life for you all today is a reflection of who we are, what we do in the market. As mentioned, depending on where you sit in the financial supply chain, your stakeholders might look slightly different, and your proximity to or contribution to the impact that's being enabled may look different. I will start out by naming that the case study that I'm bringing to life actually predated. This is from an annual report a couple of years ago, the impact reporting norms, and it's a journey. So there's parts of it that we get right and parts of it that we continue to work on. I will name as well, if you want to go ahead and advance the slides. This case study sat within our annual report. It's pictured here on the right, the 2023 annual report. And inside that report, you'll see other components of what can help bring impact to life: aggregate reporting of quantitative results, client stories. So there we're speaking about the stakeholder who is receiving a product or service, really the constituents that we're looking to bring positive outcomes into their lives. And then this case study that I'm going to talk about is around the engagement of one of our social enterprise partners. And we're speaking about Grace and Mercy Household Improvement Initiative. They're a financial service provider in Nigeria, working with over 200,000 clients, providing financial services, small working capital loans alongside financial literacy to female micro-entrepreneurs. So the case study is really meant to bring to life the impact switch. Is my internet okay? I'm hearing. Okay, so these are points in terms of kind of what makes a successful case study in our experience, and this has a lot to do. We have a broad base of investors, so we work with investors and donors, about 130. They range from large financial institutions to large foundations, faith-based organizations, individuals. So in terms of who is reading the report, we operate across multiple geographies. So the report is going to be representing a broad range of different social enterprises operating in different contexts. And so it's important for us to be able to really ground our audience, meaning our readers, and the impact that they're helping to enable. And it's also an opportunity for us to showcase the excellence of the social enterprises in our portfolio. We are managing 6 funds concurrently, actually 5 now. One matured last week. It's a successful moment. But we have over 80 social enterprises operating in over 25 countries. So really being able to ground the readership and the impact is really important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how we do it in a case study. So if you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide, again, this was a case study focused on Grace and Mercy. Setting the context, really understanding not only the challenges that our social enterprises face, but the opportunity. We're investing because we believe in the resilience of households living on dollars a day. Our social enterprises are taking advantage of that opportunity, and we really do see it as such. It's a really important piece to name, not just the challenge, but the opportunity as well. So it's helpful for us to really ground the local context when we're setting up the case, naming who the intervention is engaging with and why. And then starting to tee up, as I mentioned, the social enterprise that we're investing in and their role. The internet is hanging, turn off my camera, with images as well. You're going to go ahead and advance to the next slide. Sam, or do you think I should turn my video off? Would that be better?
Yes, please, Tara, you can turn your video just to have a bit of bandwidth. Yeah, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Sorry about that. Defining the partnership. So it's really important for us to name and to mention the ways in which we're engaging with the partner at Global Partnerships. We look to provide capital that enables social enterprises to reach and create value for their constituents. But over time, we've been managing funds for 20 years now. We've come to see that it's about the capital, but it's also about the partnership. So really naming the ways in which impact analytics and advisory support has become core to the way that we engage with our partners, helping them to assess, are we reaching who we aim to serve? Are their lives improving? If so, in what ways and to what extent? So we had an opportunity to invest through one of our funds, and we saw a real opportunity for Grace and Mercy. Our underwriting demonstrated that they were serving people living in poverty and creating strong outcomes in their lives, but from a results perspective, saw an opportunity for them to tell that story with even more data. So in late 2022, we funded a 60 decibels assessment, which is mobile-based surveying of end constituents, to be able to assess the poverty level, certain aspects of the household's reality, both in terms of the number of people living in the household, for example, and then also to understand the outcomes in their lives. We engage in this way with our partners to really help them answer a set of questions. We do this engagement principally to say, okay, based on what we've heard from your clients, how can you be thinking about improvements in your product and service delivery, your outreach strategies, your growth strategies, and even your capital raising? Again, images alongside description is really important. So setting the context, defining the partnership, grounding that in who is served, and bringing forward images is another strong component of how to center end clients. If you want to go ahead and move to the next slide. So the centering of end clients, particularly given where we sit in the financial supply chain, I think there's oftentimes a tendency to kind of talk a lot about the social enterprise, which is very important. But we have found that it's equally, if not more important, and actually of value in ways for our partners to really center their end clients. And the data that we're able to bring forward based on this mobile-based surveying, to really be able to say not just people are living in poverty, but to what extent. And really the lack of access before Grace and Mercy was engaged. So really being able to bring forward and tell the story, grounding in real data, alongside, as I mentioned, using client images and client stories, to be able to say overall, this is the profile of who's being engaged by the partner. If you want to go ahead and advance to the next piece. Our case study is really wanting to bring forward outcomes, both for and through end clients. So the ways in which clients are benefiting from access to working capital alongside financial literacy training, showing not just the very much increased, but also the slightly improved. So looking here to be able to say, in this instance, you do see larger light green bars than dark green bars, but that's oftentimes where our case studies will demonstrate opportunities for improvement. To say, all of our partners want to see more very much improved being reported. So oftentimes where we're engaging with our partners is around how can they be creating more value through their product and service offering. But bringing this to life in the case allows our investors and donors to understand not just how is my capital flowing through global partnerships funds to social enterprises like Grace and Mercy, but what is the profile of the end constituent? Oftentimes we will bring quotes into the case study. I didn't include them here, but we do through the mobile-based surveying get feedback from end clients, and oftentimes those quotes help create more context alongside these numbers. So that can also be a really successful kind of complement to the numbers itself. If you want to go ahead and advance to the next slide, I'm going to move quickly here to make sure we have time, focusing on action. So highlighting insights and implications. This case study was alongside a case study from an earlier stage social enterprise that I would say had more opportunities for improvement. In this case, what we saw was really excellent client outcome metrics. I think the second finding on the impact for their more rurally based customers vis-a-vis their urban-based customers, and it was at the time about 70-30, meaning 70% of their clients were living in rural areas, 30% in urban centers, 30% is material. So really an indication of where they can be continuing to refine and improve their offering to create more value for their constituents. And then being able to benchmark that data alongside others in the industry. In this instance, seeing really strong performance vis-a-vis the microfinance index that looks at, I think it's almost 100 various financial service providers. So really, all the way through the case study, looking to, again, center the end client, provide context, describe the engagement. And then, I did include the footnotes here, and this is an area where I think that the reporting standards can even help us fine-tune even more if people want to double-click, if they want to understand and go further, making sure that we're giving people opportunities to understand where the data sources are coming from. And I think this piece in terms of the double-click is really important. So we'll be continuing to refine here. I'm going to go ahead and pause there in the spirit of making sure we have enough time for conversation. I look forward to the question and answer session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tara. I think really a wonderful story from Global Partnerships, noting that you have more than 15 active investments and almost approaching close to 1 billion in terms of your portfolio. So I think this journey around storytelling is beginning up from the session that we had with the one day, just stating around the various case studies that we are able to do, the top 5 rules that she shared around storytelling based on the case studies, and now coming to what is been happening at the past impact investment fund, that is Global Partnerships. Now, I want us to switch gears a bit and talk to Evelyn Mochan Nokagi, who is from One Acre Fund. But before she comes on board, I just have to walk over through poll question number 3, and it's about how important is it to explain why and how a case study was selected. So let's just have that opportunity to interact with the poll before we hear from One Acre Fund, who is really interacting with the farmers on the ground across Africa. We can have the poll results. So Evelyn, as you take this up, I think it's emerging that it's extremely important to explain why and how a case study was selected. Really, no one thinks it's not important. So I think as you do the storytelling for One Acre Punch, this will be some of the key things to just consider. Over to you for your case study.
Thank you so much, Samuel. What I will walk you through really is how we tend to use case studies or qualitative insights, especially within our internal reporting and in the work that we do around strengthening impact internally. So starting with slide 1, or slide 2. Slide 2. Yeah. At One Acre Fund, we've long been recognized for our rigor around impact. So for nearly 2 decades, we've used quantitative metrics, specifically SRI, to understand how much value we delivering per dollar or per dollar spent. And so SRI within the One Acre Fund space has become a really powerful quantitative metric that we use both internally and externally. And so internally, it really helps us to compare different interventions or business units within and across countries so that we can allocate resources where they'll do the most good for farmers. And then externally, it's been a really powerful fundraising tool for us in that it offers our partners a clear and credible signal of the value for money. So the impact return of the investment in One Acre Fund's vision. However, despite this centering of our impact reporting on SRI, we're not completely hyperfixated on this end product, this end number, because impact reporting for us is a process that we are continually engaging in, because it's not just about what we achieve and report on at the end or the narrative that we're able to provide at that point, but it's also about how we get there, and more importantly, how we keep getting better as an organization in delivering that impact. And so that's where feedback and insights from our farmers, who we consider to be our clients, have been essential. We value their stories and lived experiences, not as anecdotes, but as strategic inputs that really guide our design decisions. That is, they help us to continually refine our programs so as to optimize impact. And it is this impact that we then measure and report on. And so at One Acre Fund, we don't just report on impact, we really aim to build responsive programs that create better impacts for our clients. And later I'll share an example of how this shows up in practice, i.e. how we use and leverage farmers' voices to really enhance our impact performance, which we then go on to sort of measure and report on. Moving on to slide 2. And so before we get there to the example, I really do want to drill into this point a little bit more. That at One Acre Fund, we are using farmer stories and these sort of qualitative insights in many ways. But one of the most important is to design stronger programs. We really do see this as a key outcome of our internal impact reporting, in that these insights shape what we offer our clients, our farmers, how we deliver it, and who we reach. And so it really, these sort of farmer voices and ensuring that they're fully integrated in our understanding of impact and our impact potential as an organization. It really helps ensure that our programs reflect farmer needs and also the constraints that they're facing. We often don't have the internal sort of bandwidth to lead on this sort of qualitative work internally. And so we have in many partnered with external organizations such as IDEO and Busara, also Kanta, to help us to, collect these case studies that would allow us to understand our clients better. And so we really, as One Acre Fund, we encourage other organizations that, if there's a real sort of bandwidth constraint or I guess skills constraint in your ability to collect this sort of data to make these investments with external organizations that are adequately skilled, because it is valuable, and it's a good investment because it can be used to strengthen your programming, but also externally in terms of your reporting. And so one example of how we've used Farmer Voices to strengthen our design, our program design, is that we are currently rolling out or building out a gender strategy. And so we have conducted multiple focus groups and key informant surveys across all of our markets with farmers and also stakeholders to really understand the key constraints and barriers that are facing women, and especially young women, within the agricultural sector. This sort of work has been really critical in us as a program, as an organization, really understanding how we can better serve and reach women who are facing these systematic barriers that are really impeding their ability to derive full impact or reach full impact potential from engaging within the agricultural sector. And so, this is one example, but I think it really speaks about how you can leverage farmer voices where it's not a nice to have or something that you sort of use at the end point when you're writing a report, but how it can be a real strategic pull, a strategic tool in really strengthening your impact case as an organization. And so we'll be moving on to the last slide. And this is a slide that focuses more on, I guess, the use of qualitative insights and farmer voices, how it's typically used, I guess, traditionally in providing depth to more quantitative metrics. This is Adeline's story. And, at One Acre Fund, of course, we present a lot of quantitative metrics, both on dollar impact per farmer, which really flows into that SRI metric that I mentioned at the beginning. But we also collect multi-year data on quality of life metrics, whether that be food security, dietary diversity, asset accumulation. And this is quantitative data that we hold and report on annually. We have, almost 10 years worth of this sort of data. But we oftentimes look for case studies such as Adeline, which allow us to really triangulate or validate this sort of quantitative pattern that we've seen, that we've seen come out. And from Adeline, you're able to hear her share the benefits that she's gained from her engagement with One Acre Fund. And so we gained something really different by including her voice. The numbers that we share, the quantitative numbers, they carry a lot more meaning when you hear Adeline speaking about them. You begin to see that it's not just these sort of like hard numbers that are on a report or in a dashboard. We have real clients, real farmers that are benefiting in a very meaningful way from One Acre Fund, or the engagement with One Acre Fund. And these insights matter deeply because it grounds our internal learning and motivates our teams to continue to focus on impact. And for our farmers, those who fund our work, it makes the full value, or it provides a fuller understanding of the benefits of this that they make to One Acre Fund, because it's not just about, this sort of dollar impact metric. It's also about the dignity, the resilience, and the long-term benefits that our program participants are able to gain from engaging with the program. And so it does provide this fuller, deeper impact story. And so I'll let Adeline speak about some of the we call them quality of life benefits that she's been able to gain and acquire from engaging with 1 Acre Fund. You can go ahead and play the case study from Adeline.
nahisemo kujya mu buhinzi kuko ari byo nabonaga byinjiza. Ubuhinzi rero impamvu nabuhisemo nuko nabonye buzana amafaranga akazira rimwe kandi bikagira icyo bigufasha mu rugo, ukabona ibyo kurya ukabona n'ibyo ugurisha, urugo ntirugire ikibazo. Mbere ntangira gukorana nabo nejeje ibiro 250 by'ibigori. Nyuma mbona umurima nari nakodesheje binsaba ko nongera gufata ya mafaranga nkishyura ifumbire ko bari bayinkopye n'imbuto, noneho nkodesha undi murima kugira ngo nagure ubuhinzi bwanjye. Muri ya mafaranga nabonye mu gishoro tubura ari yampaye cy'ibigori, reka mfate ibirayi bikeya nabyo mbishyire ku ruhande mu wundi murima, umwe nkuhinga ibigori undi nkuhinga ibirayi kugira ngo ndebe ko nakwiteza imbere. Urumva natangiye guhinga ibirayi mpinga n'ibigori nkavangamo n'imyumbati, ntangira kubona amafaranga 2019 nari maje kubona amafaranga biruta uko mbere nari meze. Yego, urumva natangiye nahise mfunguza konte bakamereza amafaranga mu rugo, nkabona ibyo kurya. Abana banjye umwana wanjye nari mfite icyo gihe yari umwe, ntago yigeze arwara bwacya. Ibyo nasaruye byaramfashije, mbona amafaranga yo gukodesha imirima, nishyura ifumbire, bikomeza kumfasha. Noneho maje gushaka amafaranga yo gushyira kuri sako, nibwo natangiye kuvandika njye ngurisha amwe nyishyure andi nyashyire kuri sako kugira ngo nzabone noneho umurima wanjye bwite. 2020 nahise mbona kuri konti yanjye hari amafaranga 200,000, nibwo nahise ngura umurima w'200,000. Urumva ubuzima bwari butangiye gusa nkaho binyereka yuko nzatera imbere ugereranije nuko nyuma nari meze nigisha. Ndangije nyuma 2020 mu sezo yagiye kurangira, maje kugira utundi dufaranga turi kuri konte, ntangira na sezo ya 2021 mvuga ngo nzakore noneho inzu imere neza. Nashoje 2021 inzu yanjye imeze neza, naraguze na televiziyo. Nyuma iyo televiziyo nari naguze yaje gushya, ngura smart TV, ngura n'umurima w'500,000. Yego, ngaha gutyo kumanuka hepfo niho naguze 500,000. Noneho urabona ko hano harimo imbago, mfite gahunda yuko iyi mbago tuzayikuramo hose nkagura, naho hari ku isoko. Mu nzozi zanjye muri no myaka iri imbere muri 2030 ndumva.
We can pause there. But yeah, I mean, I think written case studies are incredibly powerful, and it really does make sense why we integrate that within our impact reports. What we found really valuable, and I would say even more powerful, is having these visual case studies where you can hear clients, farmers, your beneficiaries really sharing the real tangible benefits that they're deriving from engaging with your program. It really enhances any sort of quantitative report that you are putting out into the world, whether that be to the public, general public, or to funders. Having your beneficiaries actually share how they're benefiting from the program, and that really confirming these sort of like long-term quantitative outcomes, or it really it deeply it enhances your ability to communicate your impact with depth. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Evelyn, for sharing the case study, and really interesting to see how you're able to tell the story of the farmers from the ground up. So I think really, from the start of this webinar to Matt introducing what impact reporting norms is about, to Yawande just taking us through the how-to Tara sharing that from an impact fund investment viewpoint, with more than 37 million lives impacted by the work they do, now to what is happening on the grassroots. I think the journey has really been beautiful in terms of how do you really tell the stories from an impact space. I want us to move to the next session, but before that, we have a question which is around how effectively does your organization integrate quantitative and qualitative data in impact storytelling? So, Yawanda, I want to just welcome you back to be able to really facilitate our question and answer session. And a lot is already happening in the chat box. I think there are so many questions that are coming through to Tara, through to Evelyn. And I also believe at some point we also had some expression from TC, Joseph, and also Mordecai, who also wanted to weigh in. But I leave you to you, Yawanda, to be able to take us through the question and answer session, begin with the poll question and then an engagement with the audience and the panelists. Over to you, Yawanda.
Fantastic. Thank you, Samuel. So how effectively does your organization integrate quantitative and qualitative data in impact storytelling? Very effectively, 21%, somewhat effectively, 56%, neutral 10%, and 13% for ineffectively. So it seems to be something that is a bit of a challenge for people. And that really brings me to my favorite question, I think. We've had a lot of really interesting questions here, but Eric Muita has asked us, how do you address the tension between storytelling for inspiration and storytelling for accountability in impact reporting? So I'd love to bring Evelyn and Tara back to the stage so we can have a discussion on this really important topic.
Well, I'm happy to jump in. Can you hear me okay? I might have to go off of video again. Let me know if my connection is bad.
I can hear you.
And I would name as well that we need to be in close partnership with our investees to make sure that they're comfortable with the stories that we're telling and that their clients are comfortable with the information flow happening as well. So we'll just name that it's important for us to be in dialogue with our partners around which case studies we're demonstrating and why. And, it takes a certain type of partner to be comfortable putting our learning out into the world, right? Because I think the standard has been to only talk about the positives. And I think that we
I think there might be a problem with Tara's sound. Evelyn, would you like to jump in?
Maybe I can jump in here. I think, the focus of the presentation or the presentation that I gave or the slides I walked through, it really spoke about the importance of storytelling or incorporating farmer voices in program design. And so within the One Acre Fund context, we don't really think, of course, impact reporting is really critical, this sort of like end use case. But throughout the year, we're really thinking critically about what kind of program are we delivering? And are we setting ourselves and our farmers up for success as it relates to impact? And so that accountability piece, that's something that deeply resonates with us, because when we receive feedback or we're able to access case studies that point to, let's call them weaknesses within our impact pathway, our theory of change, the way in which we're delivering a service or in our intervention, that's really a critical piece of information for us programmatically, because it allows us to, or it provides us with an opportunity to take action, to begin course correcting. So it really is that learning and adaptation piece. We don't shy away from that, because it's in, really facing it head on that we're more likely to have impact numbers at the tail end that are powerful, that are meaningful, and that we're able to, report both externally and to our partners. And so I think it's a bit of, I think it's important to create a culture internally around I guess there's no shame in not getting it right. That's a critical piece of information. It's an evidence base that will support you to do better and better and iterate. And so I think impact storytelling from my side, it's so critical that it's not, again, it's not something that we do at the end. It's this sort of separate process. It's something that we really integrate in our work and how we operate. Yeah, how we integrate in our work and how we operate. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Excellent, thank you. And how do your partners receive your storytelling? So what is, no, I should rephrase that. So your audience, so the people that you're reporting to, what is their appetite for case studies and storytelling? And do you think that it is something that actually does influence their decision making, or you know, elicit some kind of a response from your audience?
That's a really good question. And again, within One Acre Fund, we have we have this, let's call it this ethic around going to Gemba, going to the field. A lot of our partners don't have that opportunity to come to the continent and go into the field with our staff and meet our farmers. All they get is that snapshot report, maybe once or twice a year, of dollar impact per farmer. So the amount of impact that's been generated per farmer. And also these, like I mentioned, the more quality of life metrics. So our farmers, do they have better access to food? Do they have better access to sort of health services, education for their children? Are they accumulating assets? Do they feel that they're in a better place to sort of withstand some of the challenges they're facing climatically? And so when we share case studies such as these, especially the not so much the written word, but when they can hear from farmers in different markets, in different countries, and who are engaging with different interventions that we roll out, it's incredibly powerful, because the number, the table on a nice document, it can only go so far in conveying the meaningful effect that One Acre Fund is having in lives, in households. And so we found this to be a really powerful tool for us when it comes to really enhancing their, someone had mentioned emotional connection to our work, and to the financing, the investment that they're making with One Acre Fund. They're able to really engage in it in a more emotive way than when we don't share these sort of case studies. Tara?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I hope this isn't putting you on the spot here, but the Impact Frontiers impact performance reporting norms is trying to address this potential issue of cherry picking and greenwashing, and it's asking for preparers to be more transparent about why a particular case study is there and how it was selected. Do you think that that is something that can be accepted by the preparing community? Do you think it's something that you would be happy to do as a preparer? Would you be happy to say, we've chosen this case study in this method because of this?
Another good question. Again, I think, luckily I work within an organization that is very much centered on, anything that we share has to be evidence-based. And there has to be a very clear above board rationale as to how we came to the decision to share that data, or data point, let's call it. And so I definitely, that's not something that I would expect any sort of pushback on. I think that's something that, we would definitely opt into, because again, it speaks to, it would only allow us to more confidently, or rather it would result in our partners having confidence in what we're sharing, and that we're not cherry picking, right? That there's a clear rationale for that data point and how it came about. That even though it's qualitative in nature, our approach to to deriving it is as robust as the more quantitative approaches that we leverage, right? We present, when we presenting quantitative outcomes, there's an entire methodology section around how we came, that sort of undergirds our approach that allowed us to
Absolutely.
do outcomes. And so it provides that for the qualitative insights as well. Introduces that high level of rigor for qualitative insights, which tend to be a little bit more subjective.
Brilliant, thank you. And Tara, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this requirement to disclose your reason for including a particular case study and how you selected that case study.
Yeah, happy to chime in, and apologies for the technical issues. I think it's a really important question, and one that, at Global Partnerships, we're a nonprofit and we're a registered investment advisor. So there's compliance considerations around what we're choosing to disclose and why. And so to Evelyn's point, these are carefully selected and informed. I think the challenge, and to be honest about the challenge, is actually around how we retain the compelling nature of the content while we start to footnote and add additional details. And I think that there's probably a best practice that can emerge around how do you keep the compelling emotional connection to the content while still, and I often talk about like the haiku version, where each word is carefully selected and has meaning and importance, but you can double click and go deeper on each of those words should you choose to. And I think we need to be able to do both if we're going to move people and compel people to act. So I think there's room for work there. But I think in terms of saying, why was this chosen? If you open the back of our annual reports, it's like 3 pages of endnotes. Because we're just getting to a point where it's like we're trying to make sure that we're prefacing and providing additional detail.
Great. And I've seen a really interesting question here from Oyet Amos, who says, Yewande, you spoke about using case studies to show impact. How do I make sure the ones that I choose really represent the bigger picture and not just the best looking examples? I think that this is interesting because picking a case study looks at one case. And it's very hard for that one case to be representative of, everyone's life, in your portfolio or the performance of all the companies that you work with. So how do you assess your performance narratively from a wider viewpoint when you're using case studies?
Linda, do you want to jump in? I would maybe just note that I oftentimes think about this as like a constellation that starts to demonstrate a relationship. And so one of the things that may be of interest is to step back and say, over the course of a year in our reporting to our stakeholders, it's really hard in any one given report or with any one piece of collateral to have the whole picture. But oftentimes we'll step back and we'll say, have we been representative over the balance of what this segment is going to receive in terms of their information? Have we balanced narrative and numbers? Have we brought forward cases that highlight the types of patterns and learning that are emerging for us? Because the reality is impact measurement and management is emergent. It's iterative. We're learning. There's no one point in time where we even know what the complete picture is. Right. So I think thinking about it over time is also helpful. Yvonne, I'm curious if you have any reactions to the question.
And I think that's why it's so important to have, I like the idea of a constellation. I think that's why it's so important to have both quantitative and qualitative data that you're pulling from. Because for us, it's in the quantitative data that we're seeing these multi-year trends and patterns. And so for partners, when we present, again, these sort of multi-year quantitative outcomes, and then we share case studies such as Adeline's, they're able to see that, like you said, we're not always doing well on every single metric, but on the whole, Adeline's story it does give an accurate enough account of the average farmer's experience with the program and the benefits that they derive. But still, the partner, the external user or reader is able to contextualize it with the quantitative outcomes. That's a little bit more longer term and like very, very detailed.
Thank you. And just going a little bit more into the how of doing case studies, do you have a comms team that does this, or is it the investment team that does it? What kind of tools really enable really effective data collection for storytelling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say for global partnerships, we have a fully embedded impact team with our investment team that works very closely with our social enterprises over time to understand the impact that they're looking to enable, how they go about doing that, and the results that we're seeing, and then how that data can help actually drive stronger decision making. So in terms of surfacing cases, engaging with partners, having important relationship managers that are seeing where that's a compelling story, that's a compelling insight, that's a compelling result. And then I'd say that we have a very, very lean, just recently hired a director of content because we do think there's an opportunity. We really take so much of that learning and drive it back into our investment strategy as an operator, as a fund manager. The critical use of data is for decision making, but I'd say that we are starting to invest in and also lean into our ability to bring those insights to a broader market. Pause there.
And maybe just to add to that, it's something I mentioned in the presentation. We've really, when I think about our MEL team, our internal MEL team at One Acre Fund, it's almost like a research organization within the fund. We're very quantitative in terms of the skill sets that exist within our team. And so that's why we've sought external support. I mentioned Busara, I mentioned Kanta, IDEO. We've brought them in because we've recognized that we don't have the internal the internal skills, the required skills to do this and do it well. And so it's something that we would recommend other organizations, if you're able to make those investments so that you are acquiring that information and the qualitative insights. And then we have an internal comms team. As you mentioned, we do have an internal comms team who then work with our external researchers, our external partners, and us to then communicate these sort of like case studies out, and also just like construct them and see where they fit within the overall impact story.
Excellent. I'm not sure how much more time we have, but I really like this question. I want to try to squeeze it in. How can we adopt modern tools such as AILYZE, AILYZE? I engaged with it and it's amazing, qualitative data analysis. So more tools.
Evelyn, I see you nodding your head vigorously. Do you want to jump in first? You're on mute.
You can kick it off.
Okay, well, I'll keep it brief. I think it's a question we're all sitting with. I think that our take is that there's a human component to this work and to storytelling, that over time, if we lean too heavily on AI and don't coach it well, that we're going to lose the human and the voice that is really, I think, authentic to the impact, highly contextual, highly local. So I think we want to be thinking about how AI can help bring more efficiency into our storytelling and case study. But I think that really at the heart of this is human experience based on our mission, and we don't want to lose that either. So I think it's a great story, and one where I'm sure we're going to see more and more tools available. And what I would hope most is that it is a resource intensive practice, particularly given who One Acre Fund serves, who Global Partnership serves, particularly in terms of the first mile storytelling. And so if we can be more efficient in the ways in which we're capturing and telling stories, then I think that would be a real win.
Excellent, thanks. Evelyn, is there anything you want to add to that? I think we may be at time. I'll just wait to hear from Sam.
Yes, thank you so much, Yolanda, for this session. I think before we close out the Q&A, there is a poll question that is just coming up, and you can be able to take that up before we move to the next session.
So the fifth and final poll question. After this session, how has your understanding of impact storytelling evolved? Improved significantly, improved somewhat, or no change? Looking good. 58% say improved significantly, 37% say improved somewhat. Yes, there's still a lot to learn on this topic. 6% say no change. So thank you so much to everybody that stayed to the end. Thank you again for sticking with us these last 4 months. I think we've been doing this series. Thank you, Evelyn, and thank you, Tara. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Wande, Tara, Evelyn. So something interesting will be happening in Nairobi, Kenya. And Nasri, I want you to just take this opportunity to tell us what happens after all these virtual sessions and the connections that you have made here. Over to you, Nasri.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Yawande, Evelyn, Tara. I'm very much feeling all that female fierce energy today. I have some very amazingly talented women in this space doing some really great work. So it's such an honor to be part of this today. And of course, the gents supporting us today, Matt and Sam as well. And as Yawande mentioned, we have had these sessions running for the last couple of months, and it was quite deliberate. So there was organized structure to it because we were working towards a significant event. The AVPA is having our conference in Nairobi from the 3rd to the 5th of November. And I think we can move to then, and we have Matt who's going to be joining us because we're going to be offering a masterclass on impact measurement and performance management at the conference. And we're very excited to be able to do this. And one of the reasons that we have masterclasses offered is because we do recognize that, very similar to what you've experienced in the last hour and some, is that there should be spaces of learning at conferences such as this, because you can be able to implement some of these things into your next session with your team, into your next strategy thought. And so that's really going to be very exciting. And we're really glad that Matt is going to be part of the conference this year. In the chat, a special little something for all of you who joined us today. There's 10% discount if you choose to claim it. If you want to take your phone out, there's a QR code on your screen in case that's something of interest. But I just also wanted to take a moment as we move on, just to reflect on what we've had back from our panelists. I think on the call there's folks coming in from Rwanda, from Kenya, from South Africa, from even Lesotho I saw, and other spaces. And I think at the beginning of it, as Tara was speaking, even with the global nature of the work that they do, it's really thinking, I found it very interesting that it was the rural clients that they were able to see the real, impact. And so thank you so much, Tara, for being with us and sharing those, and telling us to focus on the relationships as well, and to be in dialogue with our partners and our clients. And And if I could just segue into that AI question, because we just recently had an AI session and sort of the implications of using AI in the work that we do more broadly around reporting and research. And the concerns around hallucinations, created data, fabricated data when it comes to reporting are real. But one thing that remains true is the human element. The fact that the work that we do will always touch human beings. And so this balance between what we are able to offer from a qualitative aspect, hardcore numbers, percentages, but that human experience that, we've been able to see in Adeline's story, because it really made me smile when, she said she bought that smart TV. So it's even beyond looking at, the numbers, that our work as a collective, as for all those who are joining, we've looked at, all the attendees today, we're all doing incredible work, whether it's private sector engagement. I've seen I&M Bank, I've seen Kengen Foundation and others. I've seen Chanson Foundation, some of our members on the call, and organizations such as Faro Foundation doing incredible work in Somaliland. So we have been able to see what this applicability of these tools are across a wide area of sectors. So we had shared the impact reporting norms in the chat. This and other sessions will be shared with you. An invitation to join us in November, and a further invitation to continue to engage with us as we continue to offer more information around this, so that we can be able to support all of us in this ecosystem as we continue to report on our impact, as we continue to drive change, and at the end of the day, make the lives of so many on this continent better. Thank you very much for joining us. And I wish you a very lovely rest of your day. The final poll question is there on your screen. So I'm hoping that we've convinced you somewhat to be able to join us in the future. Please take a time to just tell us whether you found this to be valuable, especially for those who have been joining for those 4 sessions in advance of this one. And if you'll be attending a conference in November, and if you'll be particularly interested in meeting Matt in person for the masterclass on impact measurement and performance management, that'll be held there. So I'll just give you all a few seconds to be able to respond to that, so that we can be able to launch the results on your screen. Kindly launch the results, please. All right. So overall, you found that it seems that there was more of those who felt that it was very valuable and extremely valuable, and moderately valuable. Thank you for everybody because there's no zero, so that's quite validating for us and the team. So thank you very much. For those who didn't find anything interesting, and at least 41% of you say you'll be attending the conference. So we look forward to meeting you all in person. Please walk up to us, let us know how you found this session today, and as such, if you'll be interested in meeting up during that masterclass as well with Matt. And that's a resounding yes at 88%. Thank you very much for offering us those insights. And if we could just have all our panelists back on the screen for a final thank you. Thank you very much, Matt, Yewande, Evelyn, and I know Tara had to drop off, and Sam as well for moderating so brilliantly throughout the session. Thank you to the team as well. They're not on the screen, but there's a whole team behind. The AVPA comms and programs team and events team are working in the background to make sure all these sessions happen. So very proud of all of them. So thank you very much, everyone.
you, Nazreen.